Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Arseholics podcast on a Thursday night with Mize. Hello, Mize.
Hello, Raj.
Sorry,
how's it going, mate?
I don't know why I did that. And Raj, yes, thank you. Yes, you got Mize and Raj tonight, and thanks as always for joining us. Always appreciate it. I always forget to say this, so I'm going to say it now. Please, could you like, subscribe? You don't have to like if you don't like it, but we'd still really appreciate it if you subscribe. If you want to share as well, all those things, please do. We really do appreciate it. And thanks also for a lot of people more people now who have been interacting with us on social media, etc., giving your comments about the pod and whatever we covered on that pod, and we really enjoy your interaction. So thank you. And Aaron sends his love to everyone. He is on a work social, I think in some other country. It's like seriously, I think is he even in the UK?
He's in Shoreditch, mate, obviously. It is very Shoreditch.
But he said he was travelling as well.
Oh, did he? Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think
I just assumed it was a Shoreditch picture.
Yeah, so Aaron works for one of these really like funky firms who do really cool things, like fly everyone out to a random city for a summer social.
For no reason.
Yeah, for no reason. And they have like a Mario Kart room in their office and stuff like this. So
have you just made that up, or is that?
No, I've been. No
way.
They've literally got a little room like for video games. I think it's just called like the Mario Kart room. They've also got a sauna next to it.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, mate,
it's crazy.
Need to work for a startup. Fintech.
There you go. Young man's game.
What are you trying to say?
So we might have we're just on the threshold. But anyway, enough of that. For everyone who listened to our last episode, we started reviewing the squad. Obviously, it's season's finished now. It's time to reflect. We talked about strikers last time. It was quite good timing in the end, because at that point, Lacazette hadn't actually left for Lyon. But probably our conclusion on that pod would be, it'd be really nice if he left on a free and went to Lyon, which he did, which is fantastic. So that was good. So there was nothing that we said that has come back to bite us in a silly way. But it was a good timing, as I said, because he has gone now, and we look forward to seeing how some of the things that we discussed on the pod transpire. Will we sign Gabriel Jesus? Will we sign any striker? Will we sign two strikers? That'll be really interesting to see how that goes. And since that pod, Miles, I know you weren't on that, but there hasn't really been that much by way of transfer rumours pertaining to strikers, have there? I mean, the Jesus thing seems to be rumbling, but there's been nothing else, right?
There was no, to be honest, not really. There was mention of the Italian striker whose name has escaped me. Scamacca? We don't know.
We actually have an Arsenal podcast. We should really look at this. Yes, it's like something like Scamuccia or something.
I'm going to say Scamacca.
Okay, there you go.
But that's, could be completely wrong. So apologies.
Plays for Sassuolo. I actually read something. So I know I don't even know the guy's name properly, but I did read a really interesting thread about him. And it was effectively saying that this guy, you can't look too much into his underlying numbers. So his numbers don't necessarily paint him out to be this great goal scorer, but he's got loads and loads of very interesting technical qualities. And someone likened him, they really broke it down, and they basically said he's like Giroud with pace.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So they're like, it's a really interesting qualities that he has about bringing others into play, about being on the half turn, getting into really interesting body positions. They talk about his body positions a lot, like being quite like an awkward sort of character, but a very clever footballer.
A very different profile to the strikers that were sort of being linked to Gabriel Jesus anyway.
But you know what, mate? It would actually, when we talked on the last pod, we discussed how actually a really decent outcome would be perhaps if we did sign Gabriel Jesus, and if we sign another striker, and if you think that you can't go out and sign an £80 million target man as well as signing Jesus, it'll be nice to have a second striker who does give us different qualities, who might not actually be that expensive, and maybe he's that guy. Maybe that's legitimately.
Been saying it for ages since Giroud left. We need that guy off the bench a lot of the time, a lot of games last season. Anyway, don't want to get into strikers again, do we?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I actually just finishing on the striker point, that just to close that off, it was an interesting comment on Le Grove, and I think Le Grove said it's interesting. Effective said words to effective. It's interesting to notice that all the top clubs over the last two seasons have tried to go for big centre forwards. like tall centre forward. So like with Haaland and Núñez potentially going to Liverpool, and obviously Chelsea went in for Lukaku last season. It's seen as a real necessity if you're trying to beat a low block kind of thing. You having a big man's really important. Anyway, you're right. We talked about strikers, and we're not talking about strikers today. Today we're talking about central midfielders, because if you look across all our various positions, strikers is obviously a thing that we really need to address this summer, and it's kind of the striker window I've been referring to it. But the other area that we can spend a good amount of time talking, which we want to do today, is about central midfielders, because we do have central midfielders in the squad, but they're an interesting bunch. They vary in all kinds of different ages. You've got a bunch of them who have been in the first team squad last season. You've got a couple of them who've been on loan, and you've got a couple of young players as well. There's like a little group that have all sort of contributed in some way over the last year or so. But still, there is a big question mark as to whether we need to supplement our central midfield with not only body, but it's just in additional characteristics. So we kind of wanted to get into all that today. So, Miles, I think what we'll do, just like we do with strikers, let's not talk about what we might want yet. Let's talk about what we have. And very clearly, right, Miles, last season, there were 4 central midfielders who essentially established themselves as our main unit of 4. And actually, you could probably break that down into 2 and 2. Very clearly, Thomas Partey and Granit Xhaka established themselves as our main 2 central midfielders, particularly as we worked our way through the season. It was a case of, if those 2 are fit, those 2 play. In central midfield, it's those 2. Yeah. And then, although the beginning of the first half of the season, your third central midfielder probably looked like it was Lokonga most of the time. Second half, it seemed to be Elneny. But it was those 4 essentially, that made up the vast majority of minutes played in central midfield. Let's talk a little bit about Thomas Partey, Miles, because last season was a really important season for him, right? Because we talked at the back end of last season, we were sort of comparing him to Pepe in terms of potential disappointment versus expectations. But how do you think overall he performed this season?
I mean, yeah, I think there were still points during the season last season where I was getting quite frustrated with him. And I think I called that out a few times on the pod, kind of in post-match discussions. And maybe I was nitpicking a little bit, because I think overall, when he was fit and he was in the team, and when he was having a run of games, I think overall, I think the best way to sort of describe the kind of season he had is you saw what we lost when he got injured. And it felt like the points that he got injured, he was really kind of ramping up in terms of performances and having that run of games. And that was the most frustrating thing for me about kind of Thomas Partey last season. But I think he showed signs of why we spent so much money on him and why we activated that release clause. And I think, like I say, he was just starting to show that consistently while he was fit. And then the injury came. And that was the most frustrating thing. And as soon as you took him out of the team, look, Elneny was a pretty decent deputy when he came in. But at the same time, you do know what you get with Elneny, and it is limited. And I think when Lokonga came in, you definitely saw, for those few games, it wasn't necessarily a drop in quality, but I think it's just a drop in everything you'd expect, considering the age of Lokonga, Lokonga's age, his level of experience compared to Thomas Partey. And this is the interesting thing, and I guess we'll come on to this, but this is where, like this season, there'll be a lot more games where a player like Lokonga, assuming, we keep him in the squad, which I think is probably a safe thing to assume, it's the kind of season where, with the extra games compared to last season, he should get, it's not just getting the minutes for me with Lokonga, it's also, like when he got dropped into the team, it felt like it was very cold, if that makes sense. Like he was trying to fill a massive hole in central midfield in a key position. And it's almost like it was a bit of like a deer in the lights type, like deer in the headlights type of scenario where I think that he struggled just to fill that gap, and the expectation was probably a bit too big. Whereas this season, hopefully with those Europa League games and him getting, cup minutes, he can hopefully kind of build confidence back and almost build himself into the team, if that makes sense. My other concern with Thomas Partey, like obviously, is now 2 seasons in a row we haven't really been able to rely on him for the whole season or for 30 plus games. I don't know how many games he played last season, but obviously he missed quite big chunks, right?
Yeah,
you're probably going to tell me how many games he played last season.
I will tell you how many games this season. So in terms of minutes, he was less than Jacka overall, but it wasn't hugely fundamental. So Thomas Partey played 2,100 minutes and played 26 times.
Okay,
so as a starter or as a sub, he played 26 games. Jacka played 30 games by contrast.
Jacka probably missed games through suspension, I'm guessing, as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Partey probably did as well. If you remember, did he get sent off against Liverpool?
Oh, did he? I honestly can't remember now.
Do you remember when he got back off the plane from African Nations and just got sent off?
He got sent off. Yeah, we rushed him back. Yeah.
So
like I said, that's kind of, like I said, that's one of the big concerns for me is he was signed as the kind of midfield general type player, ready-made, all the experience that you probably
the biggest central midfield signing we have made in many, many years. Yeah. In terms of money, in terms of stature.
Yeah, all of that. And, it's really, that's the really kind of disappointing thing, is just, we're going into next season. I guess he's still technically not fit. I don't know if he went away on international duty or not. I have absolutely no idea. But he wasn't fit at the back end of the season just finished. Assuming he's back for pre-season, fine, and he starts the season with us, but can we rely on him? And I think that opens up the question and the discussion around what do we do if Arteta and the powers above kind of thing look at it and say, well, yeah, we know that we can't rely, kind of like Kieran Tierney. We know that he's not going to be there the entire season. He's going to miss a chunk of games. There's a good chance of that happening. How do we address that? And what do we do? Because even though Elneny signed a new deal, do we really want Elneny playing 20, 30 games next season? I'm not sure that is the solution, or that's the optimum kind of, plan B, as it were.
Yeah, agreed. Just circling back on Thomas Partey specifically, does it concern you that when we signed him at a player at the peak of his powers? It was a signing that Arteta hasn't really made so much yet in his Arsenal career. He hasn't often gone and just signed a player at the very peak of their powers at that sort of 28 age sort of bracket. Basically, signing a here and now player that you're not having any sell on value in mind. None of that. It's all about impact right now. Does it concern you that really? I mean, he's going to be 30 in a few months, I think, and he's
29 next week, I think.
Is that right?
I think so. I think he's either.
You're right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm thinking about Jacka actually. I'm thinking about Jacka. Yeah. Jacka's there. You got a couple of lots. Yeah, you're right. Partey turns 29. Does it concern you a little bit in this? A lot of players these days, because of the way that players are in terms of their fitness, a lot of players who aren't very injury prone, who are very naturally fit and who have kind of prepared, etc., the right way during their careers, they are lasting so long, right? And age it's kind of irrelevant now. 28 was we go back 10, 15 years, right? Everyone used to talk about 28 was the peak, and then you go down. Arsene Wenger famously doesn't offer players, over 30 more than a year long contracts. Things have changed now. But at the same time, it does still feel like if you're a player who's quite injury prone, like I think Thomas Partey has proven himself to be, then approaching 30 suddenly gets a little bit scary for a central midfielder, I think. Does it concern you a little bit that we may have actually already seen the best of what Thomas Partey has to offer this Arsenal team?
I wouldn't necessarily say that's the case. I think, I don't necessarily think that, because I think you're still going to get a bit, like you said, how many games did he play last Premier League games last season? Was it 26 or so games? Like he's played the majority of the season. I'm guessing most of those, if not all of those appearances, were as starts, right? Very rare.
Yeah, so 26. Actually, I can't break down the number. He was in the squad 28 times, 26 appearances. I'm going to presume the vast majority, like you say, were as a starter. Yeah.
So I think for next season and for future seasons, you'd like to think that you're still going to get a good amount of playing time from him. But the problem is that you want that player. You want that consistency. You want him to, because I think the other thing with Thomas Partey is we kind of saw when like the injury, like basically, like I said before, when he had a run in the team, that's when you started to see the very best of him. And there are games when you watch him, he can look a bit rusty. Is maybe the word that is maybe best to describe some of his performances. Sometimes it's not really his performances; it's just moments during games where his passing can be really off. And obviously, he's the kind of player that does like to sort of try and not necessarily take on players, but probably does like to take on players, and he does take a risk in central midfield sometimes. And when it's not coming off, it does expose you. And I think you saw, like I say, his form improve having had that run of games. So I wouldn't say I'm necessarily too worried about have we seen the best of him or not. Like I say, my main concern is how do we kind of solve the problem? Like if we just say we're not going to have him for 30% of the season, what do we do? Because is Lokonga necessarily ready to step up? Are we going to go for? Are we saying we're happy with Elneny? Because I personally wouldn't be all that happy with Elneny playing, like I say, 10, 20 Premier League games, whatever it is. And I think and I know we're going to get into incomings, or potential incomings in that position. But then that raises the question of like a player like Bissouma, for example. You know, is that the kind of player that we should be looking at? But yeah, I don't want to jump the gun, and I know we're talking about current players.
Well, I think whether it's current players or if it's new players, I think one of the things that can probably help us manage the Partey situation, because I completely agree with some of the things that you said before. I think for me, he is our best central midfielder. You know, still on his day in particular, I think he's phenomenal. I think the things that he does when he's really on song, they are another level compared to some of our other central midfield, compared to all of our other central midfielders. It's the little kind of half turns, the kind of ways in which he gets himself out of some situations, the passes that he makes, taking players out, just he really can dominate at times. And I wonder whether our solution for managing his fitness is the same as what we probably need to do with many areas of our squad, is just rotate better. And last season, we basically didn't do that, partly because we had this small squad, because there weren't that many games. You know, it was really Jacka and Partey. When they're fit, they play. When they're fit, they play all the time. And, you know, then we got to that Crystal Palace away game, and that's when Partey got injured. And, you know, maybe that doesn't happen if we rotate better. Who knows? Yeah. But, yeah, that is something that we probably have to resolve. Going to his midfield, the other guy who played, granted Jacka, he played the most minutes for Arsenal, partly because he managed to stay pretty fit, but also because arguably he's having his best football, in his Arsenal career right now. Arteta's certainly got the best out of him and continues to get better and better under Arteta as the seasons have gone on. How do you feel? I mean, do you agree with me? Do you agree with me that last season was a strong season for Xhaka?
Yeah, I think we're now, 5 or so years in with Granit Xhaka. I think you know exactly what to expect. I think he gives you, as we've sort of repeated many, many times, right? He gives you a good run of solid performances, and then there's always that kind of clanger, giving away a penalty, red card, doing something stupid. And I think he's probably improved in that aspect slightly, but it's always going to be there. I think it's always going to be there. I don't know if you heard the interview he did. I don't know who it was for actually, but that was very telling, because he basically just said, like, I'm just
that's who I am.
Exactly. I'm just going to play like that, and I don't really give a shit. So fair enough, and as long as the manager is going to keep playing him, then you've got to kind of accept that you're going to have that one in every 10 or 15 or 20 games. But look, for a guy who how many seasons was it ago now? 3 years ago, maybe 2-3 years ago, with what happened against Palace. Was it Palace? Yeah. It was Palace, yeah. Right? You know, if you'd have said to any Arsenal fan, he'd be kind of still around and playing as many games as he's playing, and still an integral part of the squad and the team in 2022, we wouldn't have expected it. And we didn't expect it last summer during the Euros, when he was being linked to Roma as well. And he's now ended up signing a new deal. So all in all, I think I'm more than happy with Xhaka being part of the team, part of the squad. And I think there is, you do hear a lot of players talk about what he brings, like how much of a mentor he is. And, as one of the more experienced players, I think Tavares was was it Tavares?
He did. He talks about against West Ham, wasn't it? Particularly, he gave an anecdote about that game, about Xhaka's ability to talk to players and say the right things at the right times.
Yeah.
If we look forward to the coming season, I think one of the things that encourages me about Jacka versus Partey situation is, firstly, Jacka seems to be a lot more robust. He tends to get injured a lot less. But also his game isn't really a game which he's running all around the pitch. He's necessarily... Maybe I'm doing him a bit of a disservice. I'm not saying that he doesn't work hard. But I think he also puts himself into situations where he's not necessarily likely to get injured as much, I think, so I'm less concerned from a going forward perspective that Xhaka can... especially the type of role that he plays as well. I guess what I'm saying is, fitness-wise, I don't have concerns that he's going to get worse as a player over the next couple of seasons. But it does, it raises an interesting question just more generally, right? Around, okay, even though this has been Xhaka's best season, arguably, as an Arsenal player, and seemingly that's partly down to Arteta playing him in a position where he's slightly more forward than he has been in other stages of his Arsenal career. So he's plays slightly higher up the pitch. It means that, maybe he has a lot more protection that way. Partey gives him a lot more protection. He's not being exposed as much, and that helps. In your opinion, although that has been a system which has got the best out of Xhaka, do you think it's a system which we need to keep for next season, or do we think that as a system it needs to evolve and maybe that won't be good for Xhaka?
I think, good question. I think it, like, in my ideal scenario, or how I'd like next season to kind of play out, we're obviously being strongly linked with Tielemans. It sounds like that's a deal that, a player that we're very, very keen on. And look, if we make the assumption that he does come in, I don't know how dramatic of a change this is. It probably is quite dramatic, but to say that potentially, like, Tielemans plays as a number 8 type player, alongside Thomas Partey, I'm not sure you necessarily have to change the system massively to kind of accommodate Tielemans. So therefore, but then what I would like to see is that as you mentioned, that rotation between those 3 players, those 3 central midfield players, as much as possible, to kind of, almost protect Thomas Partey a little bit, and to essentially not be relying on Granit Xhaka for the entire season, because we said that quite a lot last season, right? We were like, as good as Xhaka's been playing, he's obviously playing because there's essentially no one else. So for me, from sort of next season, I'm kind of I'm hoping that we almost bring in another player who you could argue is an upgrade on Xhaka, which automatically means that, Xhaka does get less minutes. I mean, I don't know. How do you see it playing out? Because the system change is quite an interesting one, isn't it? Because then do you talk about 3 in midfield and potentially, and then you're talking, then if we bring in a Tielemans, then there's obviously the option of playing all 3 of them.
Well, I just concur with what you said before about rotation again, right? So I don't even think it's that. I think, you know what? There's a chance that we do have to change our system every now and again, or maybe, if Tielemans is in the team, maybe the roles change a bit. But I think overall, it doesn't really matter, because I think we need to rotate, and different systems will work better against different teams, and we need to have different options. So I personally think it's fine. I think that I think a lot of Arsenal fans get very fixated about, if we sign this player, then who's going to start? They do that a lot. They do it in central defence a lot at the moment. When people have been talking about Saliba coming in the team, they're like, who's he coming in for? Right? Do you know what I mean? And you look at all these other teams who have got loads of centre-backs and loads of players, because you just rotate and you have competition. It's fine. It's just a byproduct of being in lots of competitions and having a squad. So I don't necessarily mind, but I do think that Arteta will probably have some questions that he'll be asking himself over the summer as to, what are the best systems that he needs to play. And ultimately, a byproduct of of Jacka playing higher up the pitch is that Thomas Partey has to play further back down the pitch. I personally don't mind that because I don't think Thomas Partey really offers you much in the final third, right?
No.
So I don't mind that personally, but it will be interesting to see if whoever he brings in, Arteta, whoever Arteta does decide to bring in, what is his plan for that person specifically? Is it actually just another option, or is he going to try and build around that person? That'll be quite interesting to me. But yeah. just very briefly, the other two in that four, I think we can very quickly talk about Elneny. He doesn't require that much conversation, and I don't mean that in a bad way. We talked towards at points during the season just gone about whether we'd like Elneny to stay, and particularly we talked about him in a very positive way over the back end of the season. What I was surprised about, Miles, I don't know if this surprised you, but I think it's probably because it was the back end of the season and he was playing a lot that it's in my mind. But actually, Lokonga still played more minutes for Arsenal than Elneny did last season.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's very strange. And I think partly it's because at the beginning of the season, Lokonga was getting minutes. He was getting a fair amount of starts, etc. But just talking about, again, Elneny a second. Look, we're in Europa League next season. It's another competition. He's someone that Arteta has worked with as a player, as well as, when Arteta was a player and now as a coach. He obviously knows the squad. He knows the club. I'm talking about Elneny now. Was it a no-brainer giving him a little bit of an extension, Mice, given the Europa League competition that we're in this season?
Yeah, absolutely. He's exactly what you said. He's a perfect kind of squad player for the extra games, as it were, that you don't want to kind of almost risk Thomas Partey and Granit Xhaka in. So yeah, I think it completely makes sense. And he's obviously not going to be on massive wages, I would assume. And he seems like he's just very, very happy to fill that role in the squad. And he's not expecting to start every great game. He's not banging down on the manager's door saying, I played really well last week. You need to start me next week, kind of thing. He doesn't have that expectation. I think he basically knows he's doing pretty well to be at Arsenal. You know what I mean? And it's almost like, just give me the contract. I'll sign it. I don't care what the number is. It's that type of thing. So, because obviously, look, once he leaves Arsenal, where's he going to go? He's not, realistically, I think he's been linked with teams in Turkey. So, no disrespect, but I think he knows that this is probably the best club he's going to play for in his career. So, completely makes sense. It's a 1-year deal I think it's an option to extend for another year. Probably that depends on if we get the Europa League again. I wouldn't be surprised if he's there on the last game of the season, signing his contract in the press room, a second season in a row. So absolutely makes sense. And I think the thing that I really just don't like. So next season, like I said, I hope he's not. Obviously, he won't be starting Premier League games if the first choice central midfielders are fit. I would be more than happy to see like an Elneny, Lokonga central midfield for the first 6 Europa League games, assuming that they're fairly comfortable, right? And we don't need results in the last couple of games. Like that's that's probably the midfield I'd want to see. Again, depending on who we bring in, and then you kind of have your like wild card type player where, and I'm guessing we're going to get onto this, is like maybe an Aziz or Patino, or maybe even a Maitland-Niles. Who knows what's going to happen with him? But another player that you use in those sorts of games, and that's kind of like where I want Elneny to be, and that's the extent of his involvement next season, and he fills in when we're down a player, essentially.
Agree with you. I want to talk to you about Lokonga because, and I say that in a very genuine way, because, and not just because I'm we're doing a podcast and I need to introduce a topic that way. I'm saying that because for most things that we talk about on this podcast, right, you and I, or whoever it is in our group that's on this pod, we've probably talked about it in some way in the pub or on WhatsApp. And to some extent, we are kind of covering ground that we have covered privately already. But partly because Lokonga didn't really play towards the back end of the season just gone, I feel like we haven't really discussed him that much. And I'm so intrigued to get your thoughts as to where you see this going next season. So let's just do a quick recap, right? We signed him at the beginning of last season, signed him from Anderlecht, if I'm correct, where he was club captain. And there was quite a lot of hype actually about him because Vincent Kompany was allegedly saying that this kid is outstanding, one of the best central midfield talents that he's seen. He's hyped him up to Thierry Henry, like when Thierry Henry was involved with the Belgium side. There was a lot of buzz around this guy, and actually a lot of the Arsenal pundits on Twitter, the people who seem to actually know their football, talked about this guy in a very, very high regard. So he started playing some games for Arsenal towards the beginning of last season. Actually, he showed a lot of technical proficiency. Like he showed, and we were really buoyed by it. But then basically at some point kind of came out of the team. The main two central midfielders established themselves. And you mentioned about how, he was kind of put into deer in the headlights type situations towards the back end season. And I completely agree with that. And I've always felt sorry for him reflecting on that, he'd be coming in and we'd have changed formation as well that day. And he's playing as a lone central midfielder or something, it would be really difficult circumstances. But what do you see for him, Miles, next season? Because is it going to just be much the same? So do you see him just playing a similar sort of backup role? Or do you think someone his age, where there's still arguably some development kind of required, and he's 22 years old, still young, right? Mm. Is there any chance you can see him going on loan somewhere, or would you really like him to be a part of this Arsenal team?
I would be very surprised if he went on loan next season, considering with the Europa League now added into our schedule. I think for me, I didn't actually know he's 22. I actually thought he was a bit younger than that, which is quite interesting because I think for me, I would like to keep him in the squad because I think we're just going to have so many games. Ideally, and hopefully, we're going to have so many games next season. We're probably going to have to call on him and probably going to have to call on Elneny and a few other squad players. And I think it comes back to what I said before, right? He needs to get those games in the team. He needs to be playing and almost it's kind of getting a feel for essentially playing matches without having the pressure of, you're filling Thomas Partey's boots today and it's a Premier League game that we can't afford to drop any points in. And I'm not saying that Europa League games are easy or that, we're by default going to win them, because we're not. But at the same time, for those first 6 group games, we're expected to probably win all of them and definitely expected to come out of the group. So there is an element of less pressure. And I'm kind of hoping that he gets blooded in those games and obviously a few other cup games, so that when we do call on him in the Premier League, he will feel like he's more ready. And I feel like when he came back in for certain games in the second half of the season due to injuries, and then he eventually got replaced by Elneny, I think for those games he was really low on confidence, and I just felt like he wasn't able to kind of show what he almost felt. I don't know. I had that feeling like he was a bit restricted, like he was scared of making a mistake. Mm-hmm. If you know what I mean. And you don't really want that in a young player. And I think if you're Lokonga, I think you could probably look at it as, like, you touch on the ages of the players, right? Of the central midfield players. So Partey sort of 29 next month. I think you said Jacka's going to be 30 pretty soon, and Elneny's going to be 30 pretty soon. Yeah, and you sort of know Elneny's not going to be around for too long. And I think you look at central midfield at Arsenal, and like you say, everyone's kind of hyping him up. He's come with a bit of a reputation, not a reputation as such, but somewhat of a reputation. And I think if you're Lokonga, you're probably looking at that whole situation and thinking, maybe not next season, but maybe in a couple of seasons or 2 or 3 seasons, there's going to be an opportunity for someone to step into one of those central midfield positions. And it's not necessarily because of the 3 kind of senior players are, at the end of their careers, or like you say, 29 now is not 29 of kind of 5 or 10 years ago. 29 is still very, very young. But, we eventually will need to kind of move on from Granit Xhaka. And Thomas Partey's injury record is Thomas Partey's injury record. So there's definitely scope for an opportunity for him. And it's almost like, if I was him, I'd probably be looking at it thinking, like, if I can show what I can do in, more than a handful of games, 15, 20 games this season, then that puts me in a pretty good stead for next season. And then maybe I'm then knocking on the door for kind of like a first team starts. If we end up signing 2 other central midfielders and he's pushed down the pecking order, then situation changes, obviously, and he might look at it and think, hang on a second, I'm nowhere near the first team here. And then, and the club might look at it like that and think a loan might be beneficial for him.
Yeah, agreed. And again, comes back to more games next season means that there'll be just more opportunities. So even if he hasn't had that many minutes this season, you'd hope he's going to get more. Do you think, Wise, before we just go on to the rest of these players, so there's a couple of players on loan, there's a couple of young players touch on, etc. What's the magic number in terms of number of central midfielders that you think we need in the squad next season? So let's just, last season it was 4 basically. Let's forget the fact that Maitland-Niles kind of was there at the beginning. Do you think that it's a case where we need 5 central midfielders, 6? What is it?
It's definitely at least 5. I would
Yeah.
say. I would say the 6 could potentially be like a younger player, like a youth player who gets that first team experience and is involved here and there.
Agreed.
It's a minimum of 5, I would say. So I think we're definitely short at the moment. And obviously, look, it's very, very obvious, right, from everything that everyone's saying or people are saying. We're clearly in the market for a central midfielder, and not for a a cheap deal, not for like a Willian type, temporary free transfer, sorry, and not for another Lokonga. It's for a ready-made player that comes in and pretty much is a first team starter. So obviously, it's an area that we all know that we're short in, and we lack quite a lot in that area. So yeah, I think 5 as a minimum. I don't know. Do you reckon 6 is? I mean, look, as a fan, I don't really care, to be honest. If we get 6, I'm not going to complain, right? It's not, but do you reckon 6 is realistic?
Yeah, I think what you said at the beginning is really correct. I think that you could have 6, but I think the 6 would have to be a Miguel Aziz
Patino,
or Charlie Patino, who we'll sort of touch on. And I don't think that it's like, I think we're going to bring someone in, and it's interesting, right? Because we talked about the age profile of the main 4, with 3 of them sort of pushing on, closing in on 30, closing in, and you've got Lokonga, who's young. But 2 central midfielders who were on loan last season are at really good ages. Lucas Torreira is 26, and Ainsley Maitland-Niles, I think, is like 23 or whatever. Still a young guy. I shouldn't get too fixated about ages, but point is, 2 central midfielders who are actually in their prime years, right? Who are out on loan. Quickly on Lucas Torreira and Ainsley Maitland-Niles. It looks like Torreira was on loan at Fiorentina. Maitland-Niles was on loan at Roma for the second part of the season. Lucas Torreira at Fiorentina did seem to have a good season with Fiorentina. Yeah. I think he got Player of the Month a couple of times at least.
Yep.
But it seems like Fiorentina are making sounds like they're not going to be signing him from Arsenal, and that's because they can't seem to agree terms with Arsenal. So maybe that's just hardballing at this point, and it'll sort itself out. Mm-hmm. But Maitland-Niles, interestingly, sort of went to Roma. At the beginning, he didn't seem to be going very well. In fact, I think that there was one Serie A paper who voted him the worst signing of the window, across the league. Yeah, and he was barely getting. I think he started the first couple of games, didn't really get much, and in total, over that second period of the second half of the season, over his loan at Roma, he played 10 times. It doesn't seem like that much, but I guess in half a season, maybe that's not so bad.
Yeah.
Interestingly, apparently, he never played in central midfield for any of those games.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and also Roma have made it clear that they are not going to be signing him, apparently, so they don't want him. Although it seems like actually his contributions towards the back end of the season were actually much better than the beginning, and actually it seems like it could be regarded as a decent loan spell. So in conclusion, these 2 players may not go to those clubs. Is there any future for either of those players at Arsenal?
So Torreira, I would say 99% no. I'd say pretty much 100% no. I think, like you say, there's just the deal with Fiorentina. It's obviously they want him, right? And he obviously wants to go. He wants to play for them, and he doesn't want to play for Arsenal. It sounds like. So I can't really see, and it just doesn't really seem to be in Arteta's plans. Even though we all liked Torreira. He obviously showed a lot of qualities, and then I think he got injured, came back under Emery, was sort of played out of position a bit, and then just fell out of favour. And whatever's happened. But I just feel like it's almost like the ship sailed with him a little bit. Of course, like I would kind of love for him to be one of our central midfield options and to be a squad player this season. But I just can't see. I think everyone accepts that. No one even considers him an Arsenal player anymore. Like, he lost his squad number, didn't he?
Yeah.
To Martinelli. So was it Martinelli?
He's 11, isn't he? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think no for him. What do you think?
I agree with no. I don't think the squad number thing is interesting, isn't it? Because Saliba lost his squad number as well.
Yeah, true.
But I think it is more that it's. I don't want to put a South American stereotype, but quite often South American players, they don't necessarily settle that well, and they decide that they don't want to live in England and play football in England. And I think that might just be one of that might partly be it as well. He's gone. He came from Serie A, and he's going back to Serie A and seems to be settling in pretty well in Serie A. And so maybe that's just it.
And I think from an Arsenal perspective as well, right? He's obviously, I know that we're not great at getting money, like top money for some of these players. But ultimately, he should generate some funds, whatever that would be. And I think that's pretty important for us this summer. So I'm sure that, I just can't see a way back for him. I think Maitland-Niles is a really interesting one. It's so frustrating, isn't it? Because it's just like, just be happy playing right back. And he'd be like the perfect squad right back, where he might get the odd game in central midfield or left back potentially or whatever. Like he is such an ideal squad player. It's just he doesn't want to be a squad player. And that's fair enough. Like, fair enough. I can understand he's got higher ambitions. He thinks, he's backing himself, and that's fine. He's backing himself. And it's just frustrating because I think if you're being quite objective about it, does he get into many central midfields in the Premier League? I'm not really sure. I don't think he does.
No, I think he probably may have a shout for some of the bottom third teams.
Yeah, but then again, it's almost like a bit of an ego thing with him. Like that whole thing that happened, was it in the end of last summer's transfer window? Or
in the summer, I think.
When he put that post up and stuff. So, I think
was the summer, because do you remember he did that post and actually started in central midfield the next game?
Did he?
Yeah.
Right, okay. Oh, yeah, I remember. It was a home game, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So, like, for me, there's potential, because I think he's a player that Arteta would probably love to have in the squad because of the reasons I've just said. He's such a good utility player, but it's just he doesn't want to be that player. So I'm sure that they're going to try and find a move for him. And again, he would generate, it's frustrating again, because I think we turned down some pretty good money for him a couple of years ago. Wolves, I think, were interested in him.
Wolves are really interested.
And I don't think Wolves would be interested in him anymore. And definitely not for the kind of money that we sort of lost out on. So that's a frustrating one again. But I personally I can't see, again, I just feel like it's sort of gone a bit too, like it's just gone on a bit too long. And this, he just wants something that he's not going to get with us. So therefore it just makes sense for him to leave. But
what's that going to be, Miles, right? Because if Roma, he's gone to Serie A, and okay, fine. Let's just say at best you can say that he did okay there. Let's just assume, therefore, that Serie A teams aren't going to be going, I want Ainsley Maitland-Niles, right?
Yeah.
Where does he go from there? Then surely a better. Could this be an eye-opening experience for him? And does he come back and go, do you know what? Maybe I should just be a backup right back and kind of utility player for a big Premier League side who are playing some form of European football anyway. A team that is, you could argue, going in a good direction, a positive direction, young squad. He's been part of the youth setup. I mean, I kind of feel, unless someone can turn around to him, like you say, unless someone can turn around to him and go, we're going to sign you and you're going to be playing in central midfield. You're going to be starting for us in central midfield. Unless that happens, and I think we both agree that it's unlikely to happen at a half-decent English Premier League club, let's just say, could it just be an eye-opener? And do you think if he does turn around to Arteta and go, do you know what, I'll play backup right back, do you think Arteta would say, yeah, wicked?
It's interesting with Arteta, right? Because there is this, that he does obviously seem to be like a no-nonsense manager, and he just doesn't take shit from any players. He's obviously kind of shaped the squad in that way, right? Where he's ousted players that he just doesn't want around. But Maitland-Niles seems to kind of like be exempt. No, I wouldn't say he's exempt from that, but you know what I mean? Like, he's obviously done that social media thing last transfer window, and there's probably been other like things that have happened, comments that have come out. He's made it very, very obvious what, like Maitland-Niles has made it very, 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 very obvious what he wants to do and where he wants to play. So honestly, I don't know. I think Arteta would probably be quite happy to keep him in the squad. But I don't think he'd be able to give him any promises on where he's even going to get minutes. I mean, I think we've touched on this before, right? Kind of the talk is Cedric is a very much a kind of coaches and managers like favorite, a bit of a teacher's pet type player. And if that's the case, then is he even going to get ahead of Cedric whenever Tomiyasu's injured, or when we need to rest him, or for those cup games? So I'm not even sure he'd actually get the minutes. But look, I think if you just look at like when Maitland-Niles came into the squad and started playing games here and there for us, and he mainly played in that right back position, we were all really we were all like, wow, he looks like a decent player. It wasn't like he was the next, Fabregas in terms of his level, but he was very much a kind of a player that we were like, okay, he's got something about him. He could potentially do really well at Arsenal. And it just kind of hasn't really worked out for him. And I don't know how many kind of second chances, as it were, you're really going to get.
Yeah.
I could definitely. I mean, like you say, he's not. I don't think any manager is going to sign him and guarantee him a central midfield start. To start in central midfield, like any decent Premier League club. But maybe there's a Premier League club out there that he might kind of be open to move to, where he's likely to get more starts. Maybe not in central midfield, but and maybe just it feels like also he just needs I kind of feel like he needs a bit of a fresh start somewhere. I don't know if like an Everton or somewhere there like a Frank Lampard might. Why are you laughing?
It feels like, it's funny because whenever I think about a player going for a fresh start, I always think of Everton.
Yeah, same.
It seems like a great dumping ground. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And they'd probably pay stupid money as well, which would be nice. So
yeah. Look, I agree. I think it is sad because I do think that a lot of things, if he could swallow his pride, it's probably a smart thing for him to do to stay at Arsenal. But I do think there's the Arteta factor, and Arteta has his favourites and it may be that things have happened behind the scenes, and even though he let Maitland-Niles play that game after Maitland-Niles did that Instagram post, you've seen it with Tuchel as well when Tuchel did it with Lukaku. Immediately, you need to sort of put out the fire a bit, right? You need to kind of say to everyone watching the club, there's nothing to see here, we're all good. And like when Lukaku did that interview, Tuchel's like, we'll sort it out, nothing to see here, it's fine. And he was back in the squad very quickly, but I don't think Tuchel ever forgot, and he ever necessarily forgave. And, maybe we saw that later on in the season when he just sort of stopped playing him at some point.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it's similar to Maitland-Niles. At the beginning, he goes, okay, nothing to see here. Yeah, fine. He's an ambitious kid, wants a chance. I'm going to give him a go. And then actually secretly he was like, you know what, piss off. And and I don't know. Anyway, right. Before we get into, perhaps the sort of players that we might want to see come into Arsenal, and we touched about Tielemans. Do you think there's any chance we can see any of the young kids come in? So maybe to make a 5 or make a 6 in a squad of central midfielders. The 2 academy players who have kind of been probably knocking on the door the most is Miguel Aziz, who at the beginning of last season I think went on loan to Portsmouth, and it seemingly wasn't a great loan for him, and I think he got recalled. It was unclear as to whether he got recalled because the loan wasn't going so well, or whether it was, it was during that period that we had a midfield crisis. And he got recalled, came back. And then Charlie Patino was a slightly different story of this kind of super, super emerging talent. So he's the one that people have been talking about from the current crop of academy players as the super talent, like the kind of Jacka level sort of talent in the squad, in the youth ranks. And he got that Carling Cup start, did he? Or was it, did he come on a sub? I think he came on as a sub and he scored.
Yeah.
Everything's looking so great. Starts against Nottingham Forest, I think it was, right? And that was a poor game for Arsenal generally, but he definitely looked like someone who wasn't used to playing at that level.
Yeah.
Miles, what do you think about it next season then? Those 2 players are probably the main 2 candidates out of the sort of youth players. Can you see either of them coming in and getting more minutes next season?
Yeah, I can. Again, because of the number of games that we've got, I could see one of them. I'm not sure which one exactly. I could see one of them being that like 6th midfielder. And if you're the 6th midfielder, you're not going to be getting much game time unless we have a couple of injuries at least. Yeah. I think it's interesting with both of them because like you look at Patino and exactly what you said, I was thinking exactly the same thing, right? That Forest game really kind of showed, he's got a long way to go in terms of his development. And I think physically as well, you really sort of like, he's not a particularly big player and that needs to come, right? That kind of physicality, and he needs to kind of almost build out a bit physically. And I think kind of like with what happened with ESR, right? ESR had that loan at Huddersfield, was it?
Yes.
Which was a successful loan, and you get that experience of lower leagues in England, toughens you up a little bit, going up north, all of that kind of stuff. And I think a loan like that for a team that kind of plays the right way, because obviously Patino's just, he's a player that wants the ball and needs to be in a team that has the ball more often than not. I think a loan like that would probably be really, really beneficial for him. And I think it's similar with Aziz. I mean, to be fair, I don't know as much about Aziz in terms of how he plays, but I think in terms of his size, he seems like he's more ready Premier League wise than Patino. But in terms of his style of play and stuff, I honestly don't know that much about him. But again, it feels like he would benefit from a good loan too. So it will be really, really interesting to see if they both, because I could see them both getting loans. But at the same time, there is always like it's quite a bit of a conundrum, really, isn't it? Because as the manager, from Arteta's position, he's probably looking at it thinking, well, there's a chance that I could play Patino a few Europa League games and a few cup games, and that's really, really good experience for him. Should I keep him around? But really, I can't actually depend on him in a Premier League game if we do have, if we have a bit of a crisis mid-season. I can't really afford to bring in Patino because he's just not ready. So I could see both of them potentially going on loan, which I think would make complete sense. But at the same time, 6 midfielders is sort of the number that we're talking about, and I could see one of them maybe being that 6th kind of wild card midfielder.
Yeah, agree. So look, we both assume that the main 4, that core 4 from last season, are going to be there this season, and I think we both assume, correct if I'm wrong, I think we're on the same page, that I think it'll be one additional player that comes in from that we sign into central midfield. Just before I conclude on that, do you think there's any chance that any of that other 4, the main 4, get sold? So is there any chance that we get rid of Granit Xhaka, for example?
I can't see it now, personally. I can't see it. I think he's had his redemption from what happened a couple of seasons ago. And yeah, we touched on it, right? He seems to be a very, very important part of the dressing room. He's obviously one of the leaders. And I think, yeah, I can't, unless I don't get me wrong. There's obviously there's a price that we would take. There's if money was put on the table, I think we would take it. But I'm not really sure. We're not actively looking to sell him. So yeah, personally, I think he'll stay.
Fine. So in terms of the players that we've been linked to bring into the club, Youri Tielemans has been the one that's got the most airtime by good sources. But before I get onto Youri Tielemans, what kind of player would you like to see come into Arsenal? And I'm talking about realistically, and I'm not even talking about necessarily. It doesn't even have to be a name. What type of central midfielder would you like to see us go sign?
So, I would love to. So it's so hard now because we've been linked with Tielemans. You kind of bring yourself to the idea of a player like that, right? It's kind of like with Gabriel Jesus as well. But I think if you assume Thomas Partey stays fit, which you can't make that assumption, but if he, he's first choice, the guy that you want alongside him, I do think I would like it to be a Tielemans type player, i.e. someone who's very, very comfortable on the ball, can transition the play from defense to midfield, defense to kind of the forward players quickly. Someone who's forward thinking, can kind of pick out a pass, play through the lines. I'm kind of thinking of that kind of number 8 type player. And I think the guy that we're missing in a lot of games is when our centre backs, when our defenders have got the ball, and then you've got Martin Ødegaard as the kind of link player to the front 3, or the front, whoever's playing, ahead of him, essentially. I feel like sometimes we don't have that player that links those two parts of the pitch, if that makes sense.
Don't you think that's Partey? Would you not say that's Thomas Partey?
It can be Thomas Partey. It can be, but I'm not sure. I think it's kind of like what you said before, in my ideal team, as it were, I could see Partey playing a more of a defensive role and more of a deep lying role. And then you have someone playing alongside him who could, like I say, transition the ball from back to front a lot quicker than what Granit Xhaka can basically do. There's a lot of qualities about Granit Xhaka that we all really, really like, and he does bring a lot to the team. And when he's not in the team as well, you do notice it. But I think we've always said he's upgradable. He's always been upgradable, and I think that ball playing player, as it were, is someone that but at the same time, not a ball playing player, but someone that's also pretty combative. Basically, almost like an all round central midfielder would be ideal for me. And it's Tielemans that player. To be honest, I'm not sure he is. Maybe he is, but that's one option. That's one player I'd like to bring in. And then I sort of touched on it before, right? We're kind of putting faith in Lokonga kind of coming good in a few seasons, assuming he stays with us, assuming, whatever, things work out. And hopefully that does happen. But I think there should be a question asked this summer about we said right at the start of this episode, this discussion about Thomas Partey, and if we can't rely on him for the whole season, then what do we do about it? And it's a very, very difficult one because you can't necessarily say you just can't rely on a player because he might, like the nature of his injuries, he might be fine this season. But I feel like the nature of his injuries are kind of, I think they're all muscular and they all feel like from memory, I think they're quite similar in terms of, it seems to be basically like overplay. Kind of from overplaying or being overplayed. Now the rotation thing comes into that as well, and maybe that kind of solves the problem to a certain extent. But I said it before, if a Bissouma is available, and I know we said not to name any names, but it's hard to not name any names when there are names out there. If a Bissouma, if a Bissouma is out there or available, which it sounds like he kind of is, I think he would be an ideal player to come in, and then you've got Tielemans and Bissouma, Partey, Jacka. Like put Elneny to the side for a second. He's just like your guy who you play in like the League Cup or whatever. But those four as a central midfield quartet is, I mean, I don't know. For me, that takes us from where we are now. That does elevate us a level considerably. Like it elevates us a lot. And I think that also future-proofs your midfield in terms of the next 3 or 4 years, at least massively because of their ages. They're both kind of like Bissouma and Tielemans are both 25-ish, I think. I'm guessing here, but I think they're around that kind of age.
Can you see that? Is that realistic? Do you see?
It's not realistic.
Do you see a world? Okay,
no,
fine.
Yeah, I don't. I'm sort of saying what would I like, and then that kind of takes the pressure off Lokonga. It means Lokonga can, maybe he gets a loan or he kind of just bides his time and kind of waits to see what happens over the next couple of seasons. But for me, I think they're like, I don't know, they just seem like very, very obvious players to go and sign. And it's not just because we've been linked with them, but they do feel like upgrades on what we've got now. And they do feel like they just complement what we've already got in central midfield and as well as improving it. And not for huge money either. Like, okay, it's probably 20-25 million for both of them, each of them. But
has Bissouma got some kind of off-field issue that's
he does.
overshadowing
something. I don't know. Yeah, something going on that's not.
There's some kind of case, an allegation. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
For me, I suppose two questions for you, because from what you've said about kind of what we talked about Thomas Partey, for example, and Youri Tielemans does not come in any way to replace Thomas Partey. Like Youri Tielemans is not the player that you're going to bring in if Partey is injured. You're not going to put Tielemans in there to cover him. Do we arguably need a player that's more like Thomas Partey? Therefore, like, do we need if we bring in a central midfielder, do we actually need someone who's a bit more defensively minded than a Tielemans?
I think you could potentially, like if Partey's injured, I think you could play Tielemans and Jacka together. Do you not?
And play Jacka as a deeper player, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's quite interesting with Tielemans as well, because like, you remember when Arteta signed for us, right? When Arteta signed for us as a player, he came from Everton, and I could be wrong on this, but I feel like he was a slightly more attacking midfielder. And then when he signed for us, he played as this like quarterback type central midfielder, quite deep lying, like the Xabi Alonso type role, picking up the ball off the centre backs and then spraying passes around and distributing the ball. And he didn't do a whole lot else, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like Tielemans could potentially fill that role too.
Interesting.
Because I think his that's one of his main qualities, right? His distribution, his passing. I think he can play with pretty much with both feet. And I could see him filling that role in certain games. And then at the same time, like I said before, I can see him playing the more number 8 role where he kind of plays ahead of, say, a Thomas Partey, and he gets the ball to the forwards. Like I was watching some of the highlights of the game he played the other day it might have been yesterday actually, for Belgium, against Poland. I want to say it was Poland. And, look, YouTube clips and highlights are exactly that, right? But the thing I noticed from watching those clips was, he gets the ball and he passes it forward. He gets the ball, he plays through the lines. He gets the ball, he's comfortable kind of taking a couple of touches and then picking out a pass. And every pass, or 90 whatever percent of passes, majority of passes were forward. And I think, like I say, I think he could potentially fill both of those roles. And I can see why we're obviously strongly linked with him. I think the slight worry is that defensive. Like I'm not really sure he's the best in terms of recovery defensively. Kind of similar to Jacka, to be honest. I think once you get past Jacka and Jacka's running back to track back and try and get back, he's you normally he doesn't have a hope in hell. And I'm not sure Tielemans is like the most athletic type player in that regard as well. So that's maybe an area where he might struggle. But I think ultimately, mate, like if you look at it like this, right, we're not shopping at the top tier anymore, right? You look at like Real Madrid, they're going and buying, is it Chouamani? I'm not probably saying his name wrong as well, for 80 odd million quid, right? And he's a guy, I think he's like 22 years old. He's played less than 100. He's not played that many French league games, and they're dropping that kind of money on him. We're not at that. We can't do that anymore. So if you're looking at the kinds of players that we could potentially attain, Tielemans, mate, it does make sense. There's a lot. He's got 50 caps, I think, for Belgium, Premier League experience, ready to go, Europa League experience. There's a lot of really, really positive things about him. I was looking at his stats as well. I don't know if you had a look at them, but I was quite surprised. So he's got, last season he played 32 games and he scored 6 goals, 4 assists, which is not great, to be honest. I did expect the assists to be higher, and 2 of those goals were penalties as well.
Right.
So he's not like prolific in goals or assists, but maybe that ties into kind of the role that he plays in the team. He's the transition player, and gets the ball to the right people who do kind of go and do the damage. I was going to say the other interesting stat was, did you see the stat? Apparently he gave away 4 penalties last season, which is the top for like other players gave away three, but he gave away 4 penalties. So basically buying another Granit Xhaka.
Oh no! Oh gosh. Okay. Yeah. Well, geez, I don't really know what to say about that. I mean, you'd hope, you hope that's partly a system thing. I don't know. Let's just hope, because I sort of agree that it's been very hard to think about, to not think about names and not think about Tielemans as someone who we're going to sign, but that's the player that everyone keeps talking about. So I've as an optimistic Arsenal fan, I've geared myself up to be thinking that's a good thing. Yeah. I do think it would be a good thing, but I'm sort of with you. If he's the only one that comes in, I think I'm not 100% sure what it exactly it solves, because my bigger concern is it looks like we're probably not going to sign an Odegaard backup or an Odegaard alternative. Okay. And I think that's okay, because in the position that he plays, if he's fit, he's going to play. He's like the heartbeat of the team. So you can't really see Arsenal being a club who are, like you say, with the top table kind of analogy and where we are right now. You're not going to sign another fantastic player to like rotate his numbers. You're not going to do that. Mm-hmm. But for me, I do think that we need to find ways of getting creativity from other players in central areas. And so one of my concerns a little bit is that if we sign a central midfielder, I'd really like them to be someone who is a creator, someone who is just an alternative to Odegaard in being able to create from those central areas. And, it gives Odegaard, therefore, it makes Odegaard better, because at the moment people try and just shut off supply to Odegaard, and maybe you can't do that if you've got someone else who can create. And your stat there that you said about Tielemans, 4 assists is not, it's not many assists. I mean, Alex Lacazette had more assists. So that would be a concern for me, that he's not necessarily that alternative. He's not going to provide that creativity. I mean, what do you think? Do you think that could be a system thing, or does that not? Does it not concern you?
I wouldn't say it massively concerns me, because you have to take stats with a pinch of salt, right? Like, I don't watch Leicester close enough to see kind of how important he is to the way that they play, but I could imagine he is pretty important. He's probably one of their best players. So it doesn't like the stats don't massively concern me. Like, I'm not looking at his stats for the last few seasons and saying, oh my God, this guy hasn't scored that many goals or hasn't got that many assists. He must be rubbish. But at the same time, I think you could look at Odegaard's stats, for example, and you wouldn't say that they're particularly impressive, right? But when we watch him every week, we know how good he is. So yeah, I think you take the stats with a pinch of salt. But like I say, I think I can see, like, maybe I'm thinking about this the wrong way, but I can see where Tielemans fits in, like, if that makes sense. Like, I can feel I've got an idea, or I think I've got an idea which piece of the jigsaw he fills, if that makes sense. So and I can definitely see that kind of that player that's, like I say, super comfortable on the ball, very, very wants the ball and wants to distribute the ball and wants to get the ball from back to front really quickly. And then you've got the guys ahead of him and ahead of Ødegaard that will go and do the damage. Do you know what I mean? And will go and get the goals. And hopefully, addition of a top level striker contributes to that massively and helps that massively. And hopefully, his
good point. Really
his stats and numbers do go up. I mean, look, we're kind of talking as if we've already signed him and he's, but we haven't yet. So
it will be interesting if we sign someone other than Tielemans, mainly because we've not been linked with anyone outside of him. He's been the one, but we have seen him Arsenal windows in the past where there's been someone and then all of a sudden that's just, last season it was Bissouma. It was at the beginning of the summer. It was all about Bissouma. We're signing Bissouma. He even put some stuff on Instagram which suggested he was about to sign for someone, and none of that happened. So let's see. Still early in the window. Let's see. Miles, really good chat. I think central midfield is a really interesting area for us next season. I think, it seems, I think the four of us are pretty, four of us. I think the two of us are pretty clear on the fact that core four is still going to be there, and it's about supplementing them with at least one. But it would be great, and I agree with you. And I think it really, you mentioned it being no brainer signings, a couple of them, Tielemans and Bissouma. I agree with that. And, perhaps it is a case with Bissouma that it's something to do with this, with some allegations going on in the background. But there probably are a couple of Bissouma equivalents, in the market. If you look in the Premier League, even last season. And it does feel to me that, like, I am worried about a Partey injury again.
Yeah,
right? Right. And I don't want next season to be a season of excuses again. I'm not saying people made excuses. I meant us as fans. I had a lot of, if only. So, if only this player didn't get injured, whatever. I don't want that next season to be that kind of season, because it doesn't have to be, right? We will probably make some money from some sales this summer. Even if we don't, we've cleared out a whole bunch of money. I know that, a whole bunch of wages. I know that, at the top of the pitch is where we're trying to invest the money. And I think that's probably a good idea, right? We all like strikers. Everyone likes strikers. The hardest bit in football is scoring goals. We need that. And I totally agree, totally agree with your point about not getting really into the stats so much, because if we did have a really good striker next season, suddenly Ødegaard's stats probably go through the roof. Saka's stats probably go through. Everyone's stats suddenly change when you've got, for a number of reasons. So maybe that will be okay. But I don't know, as a fan who kind of just thinks that, that we've been through a fair amount over a number of years, and I feel we're close to being able to at least being a team that can achieve something decent. And by that I mean winning the Europa League, getting back in the top four. If those things are really decent things, getting back to winning FA Cups, I think two central midfielders who can rotate with this bunch and add some different qualities. They have to break the bank for these players. I think that does make a difference. But hey, we shall see. All right, mate. Really good chat. Thanks everyone for listening. This is a really enjoyable. I had a lot of fun talking about this today. I'm not sure what we're going to talk about next in our next episode. We may talk about some of the other positions. We may not, because I think strikers and central midfielders were really good areas to talk about. But we may start just looking towards next season, and Miles, Miles and I and Aaron and Nero have talked about trying to get some guests on the show, etc. So maybe that will happen as well. So I'll leave it there. Miles, thanks a lot.
Cheers, man. Good to chat.
Thanks for joining. Good chat, and everyone enjoy the rest of your weeks. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
See ya.